Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the YellowKings podcast. For now, we might rebrand it, or I probably will be rebranding it to a new name going forward. But for now, it is still called the YellowKings podcast. So a couple of updates. As you guys can probably tell from the title of this video, Thomas is no longer part of YellowKings. Now, before everyone starts freaking out and being like, oh my God, they have a falling out, they hate each other, they're not friends anymore. No. Thomas and I are still very much friends. We talk we have weekly catch-ups with one another in which we just chat about life, business, and everything. But he just ultimately decided that this was no longer something he wanted to commit to, just because, if you guys didn't know, running a podcast, and doing all this stuff with video editing, coming up with ideas and all that stuff, it's a lot of time commitment. In addition to that, it's a lot of just mental stress, and it's just another thing you need to add onto your plate, right? And he works a full-time job. He does content creation for his own accounts, and he's also building a startup. So he just decided that ultimately this was something that he wanted to take a break from, just because he wanted to focus on other efforts that are higher priority to him. Nonetheless, I'm still here, and I want to continue this podcast because I love the podcast genre. I listen to a lot of podcasts myself, which is kind of half the reason why I decided to create one myself. And I want to keep it going. But since Thomas is no longer a co-host on this podcast, even though I'm pretty sure he'll be back as a guest host for many episodes in the future, I want to rebrand the podcast name away from YellowKings. And the reason for that is because originally this podcast was created with the goal of focusing on Asian creators, Asian founders, and Asian culture. And that was what Thomas and I agreed on as the direction of this podcast, right? We want to focus on this realm of Asian founders and Asian culture. But since now it's just me running the podcast, it really took some time for me to figure out what direction I want to take it in now. Just because, I feel like my audience that I'll probably start funneling over from my main duck account, it's not Asians. It's not just Asians. It's like people with vastly different backgrounds, ethnicities, and but just different cultures, right? And I no longer want to limit my podcast to just being Asians. And I think just having the name of YellowKings kind of alienates that audience that I'm not trying to alienate, because the honest truth is the topics I want to talk about going forward isn't necessarily just applicable to Asians. I'm going to talk about careers. I want to talk about entrepreneurship, building a business, quitting your job, going from corporate to entrepreneurship. I want to talk about, tech, content creation, social media, and just overall just shit that I'm interested in. And these are not topics that are solely interested for Asian Americans. Anyone can be interested in these topics. So we'll see what happens. I'm thinking a couple names right now. Maybe just call it the NDA podcast, to be honest, or something on lines with can't say, sign an NDA, or don't say because you sign an NDA. I don't know. I'm still thinking about exactly what name I'll create for this podcast. So if you guys have some ideas, definitely let me know. But that's kind of what I want to do going forward. I'm still gonna have guests on this podcast. People come on. We're gonna talk the shit about life, career, business. There's still gonna be components of Asian culture and Asian things, just because if you guys didn't know, I'm Asian. So naturally, it'll probably lean towards that direction anyways. But I don't want to have it be if you're not Asian, you can't listen to this podcast. All right. So enough of that. So the topic being said, going forward, the things I want to talk about on this podcast, the topic I want to discuss today is, when is it time to quit your job? Right? I recently, I really like the direction of where my personal brand is going right now on Main Duck. I feel like I've accidentally fallen into this realm of kind of anti-establishment, anti-corporate type of content, but in kind of a more fun way, not necessarily toxic, quit your job today, fucking don't be a corporate fucking slave, go do something in your life. Because I honestly think that shit's kind of bullshit and kind of cringe. But I do want to cover this topic of when it's time to quit your job, just because this was something that I struggled a lot with when I was working in investment banking. Like, should I quit my job? Is it a good time? Should I wait a couple of years? Should I save up more money? And I want to attack this whole entire idea based on like my experiences of quitting my job and pursuing, into the world of entrepreneurship and stuff. And just give you guys a quick background, I worked in investment banking from 2019 to 2020 for roughly 2 years. Left my job in 2021 to basically start creating content and to build a business. I never made a TikTok video or YouTube video, whatever. I actually made my first video after I quit my job. So I basically quit my job cold turkey, right? I didn't have a side hustle, nothing. I started doing everything after I quit my job. And that was a very personal decision that I purposely made for myself. And I'll talk about that in a second of if you should do that as well. But for the past 2 to 3 years, I was doing drop shipping, which is e-commerce. I had an entire podcast episode about it. I did that for roughly 2 years, stopped doing it. And during that entire time, I was also creating content on TikTok. So I've been a TikTok creator for the past 3 years as well. And right now, currently, I run a social media marketing agency in which I basically help tech startups build accounts on TikTok and Instagram, right? So I go out, I hire content creators, and these content creators basically become the in-house creators for these brands. And I train and I work with these content creators to make good content for these different tech startups. So that's what I do right now. I run a business, a social media marketing agency, and I'm also a part-time, full-time content creator for Main Duck, which is like my personal brand. So there's two things you got to ask yourself before you quit your job. Or I guess this one thing. Do you want to quit your job because you hate your job and you just want a new job? Or do you want to quit because you feel suffocated and you want to try something new in life, right? You feel like you're meant for more, or just like, I want to try something new. I don't want to be stuck in corporate forever. I want to see if I could pursue something, I won't say greater, because I don't want, my goal of this podcast isn't to say what's better and what's not better, because I truly believe in the benefits of working a corporate job. But I do want to just cover, like, sometimes some people just don't want to work a 9 to 5, and that's fine. Some people do. But if you just hate your job because you have a very bad team, you don't like your manager, or you don't like your title, the industry you're in, and you want to get into a different industry, then the easiest answer is switch to a different team or find a new job. And I think I guess that's pretty obvious, but I think a lot of people stress a lot about, I hate my job, should I quit it? And a lot of times it's just because they don't like their manager, they don't like their team, or they don't like the industry. If that's the case, then I usually highly recommend you just to apply to a different job or apply to switch to a different team within the same company. Because if you do quit your job in that moment, you do lose a little bit of leverage in terms of like negotiating all that stuff, because you're not coming from a position of power, right? Like, you go to a new interview, you'd be like, I currently don't have any income. So, but it's hard to demand a high income when you don't have anything to fall back to. So that's what I do, right? Because I think a lot of people I was working with, they just didn't, or a lot of my friends, they just didn't like their job, they didn't like their managers, but they didn't necessarily want to quit to be an entrepreneur or pursue a business, right? They wanted better work-life balance, they wanted better pay, they wanted like a better team, better manager, or such of that sort. However, if you do fall into a category, which I fell into, which I want to quit because I felt suffocated and I want to try something new, then there's two things I wanted to consider. And there's the reason, just to backtrack a little bit, there's a reason why I say you gotta ask yourself this question: which category are you? Because everyone that works in corporate is going to say, I want to quit my job, I hate my job. Everyone's going to say that. That's something I realized. And no one likes their job, okay? 80% of people didn't like their job. But I realized the majority of people just wanted better pay, better team, or a better industry, whatever, like more prestige or something, right? But if you're in that small percentage in which you fall into a category of, no, I just don't want to work a job, I want to go do something else. I want to build a brand, I want to build a business, I want to start a clothing line, I want to do X, Y, Z, I want to become a creator, right? Then there's two things I recommend, or there's two avenues you can take. You can start it as a side hustle first. So, you want to build a clothing line, you want to start a business, start as a side hustle, right? Start doing it on the side for a little bit, and then see if it takes off, right? If it takes off, it pays you enough, eventually you can quit it and that becomes your full-time thing. The second way is you just go cold turkey like I did, right? It's like, fuck it. We're just going to quit and we're going to figure out, motherfucker. We'll figure out after we quit. All right, we'll see what happens. For most people, I will recommend the side hustle path, but I will say be careful because you don't want to get stuck in a cycle in which it forever stays a side hustle. Because I think a lot of people, and I'm just generalizing here right now, so I don't have stats to prove it or anything, but I think a lot of people probably will fall into a trap of like, it's a side hustle, you work on it like 5 to 10 hours a week, and that's all you do. And the honest truth is that if you want to start a business and run a business, it's going to be a full-time job, if not more than a full-time job, right? And if you treat it as a side hustle and it stays as a side hustle, then there's a good chance it keeps paying you side hustle money unless you're just a complete outlier. Now, you could be the person in which like the side hustle just takes off and eventually you're able to quit. But I do believe there's a point in which it's hard to, I think the argument everyone always makes is that do the side hustle, and when the side hustle pays you just as much as your full-time job, you can quit to pursue that. There's a problem with this, though. There's a big problem. If you're a fucking software engineer at Google making $300K a year, good luck having a side hustle that pays you $300K. Like, holy shit. If that does happen to you, then do both and make $600K a year, right? So I truly believe that for a lot of side hustles, there is a point in time where you just got to bite the bullet and say, I'm going to quit and I'm going to hope this continues to pay me well, right? I don't know what your number is, but have a number. Have a number that you want to set for yourself. Like once the side hustle hits like 50K a year and my current job pays me 100K a year, I'm going to quit and I'm going to try to make the side hustle a thing, right? Because it is possible to get stuck in the cycle of like it forever stays a side hustle. Now, if you want to quit your job cold turkey, I want to ask you I really want you to think about why you want to do this. And over the years, when I was quitting my job, it took me 6 months to finally decide I was going to quit my job, right? I wanted to quit my job for 6 months before I actually did it. And the reason why I ended up deciding to pursue this path of doing it cold turkey rather than building up a side hustle and or saving up more money before I quit my job, because I actually gave up my second year investment banking bonus to quit my job, right? I could have stayed for another half a year, cash out my bonus before doing it, but I just didn't want to wait anymore. I was like, I am done with this industry. I'm done with working a job. I want to go pursue something else. I'm young. I want to go do something else. So what I will say here is, if you want to get that experience, and this is going to sound kind of dumb to some of you guys, but this is how my mind worked and what made sense to me. And looking back, I was like, no, this is what I want to do. But I almost want that experience of being like a starving entrepreneur, right? It sounds dumb. Again, it sounds dumb, but I want to get that experience of like, what is it like to really struggle as an entrepreneur, right? Make no money and just be like, I need to figure it out. I need to make something work. If you want to get that experience, and I will say there's a huge caveat to this, you have to be able to be smart about it, understand if you're a person that can do this, right? So what I mean by that, I'm a person that grew up in like a semi-middle class family. So I knew I was able to move back home with my parents and live with them for like a couple years. Well, didn't have to pay rent or anything while I figure out what I was going to do next. So there is a little bit of financial privilege to making this decision, in which like you're going to quit your job and basically figure out after you do it, right? Because you want to get that experience of like grinding as an entrepreneur and starting from zero, which is what I wanted. But if you do pursue this path, there's something I'll be careful. Number one, you probably won't make money for the first 2 years. Just be prepared for that. Be prepared to get a hit to your ego. Be prepared to go to social gatherings and not have anything to say to anyone. While they're like, oh, so you just quit your job, right? So what's your plan now? What are you going to do? What business are you running, right? It's like be prepared to have those awkward conversations where you're trying to fake it and be like, yeah, I'm trying this out, trying that out, but inside your heart, you have nothing going on. But just be prepared for that, right? And understand that it's part of the process and it will get better, and understand why you did it in the first place. But I will say, those are our two routes, right? You do the side hustle route in which you do the side hustle until that thing really takes off, or you go the cold turkey route. And again, like decide what type of person you are. Are you a person that, you're more, I guess, conservative, you're more safe, you want to be like, look, if a side hustle takes off, that's great. If it doesn't, I'm cool. I'm cool just keeping a side hustle. Or your person be like, screw it, I just want to become an entrepreneur and I'm going balls deep, right? I'm diving into deep end immediately because I want to get that experience. I want to see what it's like. I want to really pursue this, right? And I will say this too. It's like for everyone, side hustle. I think I said this earlier. Side hustle, cold turkey. There's a point I do truly believe you got to take the plunge to be like, it is time to go all out in this because to start a business, it's very hard to just half-ass it. You kind of just got to go all in. Now, if you want to become a content creator, that's different. There is a lot of merit of just creating content and still working a job. If anything, like you can just make your brand, your content brand around the job that you do. So if that's what you want to do, yeah, you can definitely do it as a side hustle. And you can easily make 10K a month. Like, not, okay, I don't want to say easily, but it is very possible to make 10K a month for brand deals, selling your own products, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to say it's easy, but it is possible. So quitting your job is hard though. Quitting your job is very hard because you're giving us something you work so hard for, the stability. And for a lot of us that weren't born into families of entrepreneurs and our parents weren't business owners, it's kind of what you knew. Like you knew that you work a job your entire life, or your parents work jobs their entire life, and you knew you're going to college, and after college you're going to get like a nice cushionly white collar job. It's kind of what you knew, and to dive into the world of like starting a business, entrepreneurship, it's very much the unknown, and it is like the stability you're giving up. But I tell you right now, dude, a couple of years into it, shit, man, you kind of get used to it though. I will say, you kind of get used to it. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know if my business is going to be around next month, or, I don't know if my content is going to pay me any money next month, but fuck it, dude. I mean, I made it this far without dying. There's a good chance I just keep going forward. And if I lose everything tomorrow for some weird reason, maybe because I'm just used to it now, I almost have the confidence that I'll be fine and I'll just find a way to like make it all back anyways. So understand if you do end up quitting your job, just to wrap it up, like it's part of the process. It's hard. It's going to be rough. I want to keep talking in the future about, things you can do to kind of alleviate that stress. I want to dive deeper into my experience and kind of like my pains, my joys, different businesses that I started, and talk about the different business I think could be possibly a good idea. I'll probably got to do some research into that because my background is mostly in e-commerce and advertising, paid ads, social media, such of that sort. But I'll end it with this. Doing what I do right now, I don't wake up every day. I think there's a lot of bullshit out there in which people are like, dude, like, do entrepreneurship. Don't be a corporate slave. You'll wake up every day. You'll love what you do. Like, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I love being a creator, okay? And I kind of like running my business. It's not something I'm super passionate about, but, I don't hate it either. But I don't wake up every day being like, dude, I can't wait to start my day. I can't wait to create content, right? It's stressful. Creating content is still stressful. There's work that goes into it. There's aspects of it that I still don't want to do as well. But I will say I no longer wake up and want to blow my brains out and no longer have this like existential dread of just like, what am I doing in my life, right? Because I know I'm on this path that I want to pursue, that I decide I want to do. So in terms of stress, it doesn't get any better. If anything, it gets more stressful, but you will no longer have like that existential dread that you probably have if you're listening to this deep into the podcast at this point. But that's the episode. That's what I want to talk about for our first newly rebranded podcast episode by yours truly, Mayming Duck. Again, still deciding on a name, but let me know what you guys think. If there are any topics you want me to talk about in future episodes relating to business, social media, content creation, I want to start making these podcasts more educational, more value add as well. So when you guys are listening on the way to work or at work or after work during your workouts and stuff, you can learn something, a thing or two from me. These are topics that I've been wanting to talk about for the past couple of years. And I finally feel like I'm in a place in which I can finally talk about this from a perspective of someone that's done it before, right? Because I want to be this figure that talk about like when you should quit your job, what business start, how to actually like get through the process, the first 2 years of becoming an entrepreneur from a corporate job. But I just never felt like I was ready to talk about it. But I finally feel like this is something I can start discussing. So aside from that, thank you guys all for watching and listening, and I'll talk to you guys all next time. Peace.